A 30-year-old man was hit by a truck and died. He had been working all his life just to get by because he didn't have any special skills or talents. But everything changed in an instant when the truck couldn't hit him. When he opened his eyes again, someone was calling him Lord Jink. He was confused because his name was Saito Jinkuro. Suddenly, he woke up, and the woman who was calling him Lord Jink was crying tears of joy. She told him that he had collapsed in front of the Crown Prince. Not only was he removed from the Crown Prince's guard, but he was also banished from the country. Jink didn't understand what was happening, so he asked the woman to explain where he was and who he was. She revealed that he was actually a 14-year-old named Jink Nonland, the heir of Duke Nonland. Since he was young, he had been serving as a guard for the Crown Prince of the Kingdom of Rosalta. However, earlier that day, the Crown Prince had ordered him never to come before him again. This was because the Nonland family was known for producing skilled spearmen, but Jink didn't have any talent for it. Feeling pressured, he had gotten into delinquency. After many mistakes, the Crown Prince had enough and took away his title and position. Jink let out a heavy sigh, realizing he had been reincarnated as a troublesome kid. Memories from his previous life started flooding back slowly. Now, he had 2 sets of memories. The maid noticed Jink seemed calmer today, perhaps because he had fainted earlier. Jink realized that Jinkuru's traits were becoming more prominent in his personality. As Jink got up from the bed, he remembered the maid mentioning something about his banishment. It shocked him, and he asked her to confirm if he heard correctly. The maid nodded, explaining that upon learning about Jink's dismissal from the guard, the master disowned him. Lord Esther was chosen as the new successor. Jink was given only a month to leave the country. Knowing that the world beyond the capital was filled with monsters, Jink understood that this exile was essentially a death sentence. He felt upset that he had reincarnated as an outcast. Turning to the maid, Elsa, he asked for her help in dressing him. Suddenly, he noticed a status screen next to him. His eyes widened in astonishment as he gazed at it. It seemed like he was the only one who could see it. As he focused more, he could see the statistics in detail. Based on what Jink knew about this world, only people with incredibly rare magic eyes possessed this ability. He concentrated intensely on checking his own status, and managed to succeed after a few attempts. To his surprise, he discovered that his swordsmanship rank was S. His spear skills were graded F, while his proficiency in water and recovery magic ranked S. His mastery of earth magic and alchemy was graded A, and his skills in fire and wind magic were rated B. What truly stunned him, though, was that his enhancement was graded S. Based on what he knew, there were only 3 enchanters worldwide, so he believed he might be the 4th. This made him feel excited because having such a rare ability could be valuable. With this power, he could make various things stronger, which might help him survive in the world. His thoughts were interrupted when his younger brother, Esther, showed up. He apologized to Jink for not being able to assist him earlier in front of the Crown Prince. Esther then brought him some money and a spear. Jink expressed his gratitude and asked if Esther could gather some travel supplies for him in exchange for the items he didn't need. Esther agreed, and Jink gave him a list of the things he required. The next day, Esther showed Jink all the stuff he had asked him to buy. Esther wondered how his brother would manage to carry so many goods by himself. Jink told him he had a trick to share, something even their father didn't know. He demonstrated the skill of creating an item box, and a door magically appeared. Esther was amazed and peeked inside to find a huge empty space. He praised his brother for having such an extraordinary skill. Jink noticed that Esther's status also indicated a small item box, but Esther seemed unaware of it. Jink wanted to tell him about it, but he decided to keep his ability to appraise things a secret. He thought of a subtle way to let Esther know and asked him if he could fetch a small bottle of his red body fluid. Esther agreed without hesitation. Jink also requested Esther to accompany him to the Adventurers Guild for registration, and Esther, being the supportive brother he was, agreed. As Jink and Esther walked through the streets on their way to the guild, they heard the commoners talking badly about him. Jink felt it was understandable that they disliked him because of his previous rude behavior toward them. The only ones who stood by him were Elsa and Esther. Elsa, who had been his wet nurse and had cared for him since he was a child, naturally supported him. However, Jink couldn't understand why Esther admired him. His memories didn't offer any insight into this puzzling situation. They arrived at the guild and completed the registration process. The staff there were rude to him. In the evening, Jink practiced sword training because he had a high rank in swordsmanship. He thought about how things might have been different if he had discovered his abilities earlier. During training, he felt light and performed exceptionally well. At the dinner table, Gordon Nonlin, the head of the family, told Jink that it would be his final meal there. Jink acknowledged this, excusing himself to get ready for the next day. In his room, he enchanted some gear, including an outfit and accessories, totaling 27 levels. When combined with Jink's base level of 25, his overall reinforcement level reached 52. Using this ability tired him out. To replenish his energy, he drank a mana potion before beginning work on Esther's gift. The next day, Esther and Elsa were at the capital's west gate to see him off. He thanked both of them and gave Esther a card and a box as a present for helping him. He told Esther to drop some blood on the card secretly later. He advised him to open the box when he had left the country. Esther cried as Jink said goodbye to them and left. Jink was determined to start his adventure as he looked at the mountains outside the capital. Jink's first goal was to reach the border, but there were many cities in between that took days of traveling. He thought of using his enchant-boosted body reinforcement. After activating the skill, his body started running crazy fast. He got excited, thinking that now he could reach the destination way sooner. He stopped at a place after an hour. No matter how much he ran, he did not run out of breath. He was extremely satisfied with the enchanting skill he possessed. He suddenly caught sight of several bodies lying around injured. He got startled and started screaming. He calmed down after a few moments, but some goblins appeared to attack him suddenly. His body reacted fast to the attacks and started moving before he could think. With enchantment, he easily defeated all the goblins. After the fight, he sat down by a tree and deduced that he could level up properly. Jink had to calm himself down a little after the battle because there was a gruesome scene before him and he wasn't used to it. In this world, it was normal to take equipment from people who had been defeated in battles, so Jink took some stuff from people lying on the ground. If he brought back the remains to the guild, he could get some rewards from the surviving family, but he preferred to be out of the country as soon as possible. He got to dissecting monsters after that. The subjugation proof for goblins was an ear and a stone near their heart, which could be turned in at the guild for money. Jink was very bothered by the dissection process, but he did it anyway. Jink confronted a lot of goblins and kobolds on the way to the post town Rio. He got used to battle by the time he reached the town the following morning. He checked his status and noted that he had leveled up a lot. He took out a bunch of extra weapons from his item box, as a piece of equipment could only be enchanted once. Jink traveled a bit further and then stopped at a spot where adventurers rested. There were several adventurers nearby. He drank a mana potion to recharge when suddenly some injured men appeared shouting for assistance. They needed an X potion desperately. Another adventurer nearby mentioned how rare and precious X potions were, doubting anyone would give one away. One of the injured men dropped to his knees, begging. Jink stepped forward, announcing he had some. Judging by their appearances, the injured men didn't seem dangerous, so Jink decided to help. They gave an EX potion to one of the badly injured men who was immediately healed. Jink was surprised by how quickly it worked. A man from the gang thanked Jink and introduced himself as Alec Thunder, the leader of a group called Dragon's Tears. He gave some money to Jink and apologized for it not being enough. Alec explained that they had encountered a powerful red ogre, a high-level monster, which left them badly injured. He bowed to Jink and offered to become his slave to repay him for saving their brother's life. In this world, slavery was common, but Jink refused Alec's offer, not wanting him as a slave. Suddenly, a horde of orcs appeared, attracted by the scent of blood. These orcs were lower-ranked monsters, so Jink believed they could handle them. However, the men who had faced the ogre were still recovering, and their equipment was in disarray. Jink retrieved various weapons from his item box and distributed them among the men to prepare for the fight. Jink swiftly dealt with some of the orcs, while the others joined in the battle. Out of nowhere, a group of men was suddenly knocked out by a single powerful blow, delivered by an orc general with a B rank. Jink attempted to take on the orc alone, but the general easily pushed him back with one punch. If Jink hadn't been protected by an enchantment, that hit would have ended the game for him. The orc attempted another strike, but Alec intervened, attacking from behind. With the orc's attention now on Alec, Jink seized the opportunity and stabbed it in the head. Despite the difficulty, he successfully managed to decapitate the monster. Seeing their general defeated, the remaining orcs fled the scene. Alec praised Jink and asked if he was a high-ranked adventurer. Jink replied that he was only a beginner with a G ranking and managed to defeat the monster with Alec's help. Other adventurers nearby overheard Alec mentioning Jink's name and wondered if he was the same Jink Nonland who had been exiled. Jink decided there was no point in hiding, so he confirmed his identity. The adventurers were surprised because Jink didn't match the rumors they had heard about him. Jink then asked Alec about his plans. Alex said they were heading to Morbiberg, but now he considered himself Jink's slave and would follow him anywhere. Jink felt pressured by Alex's insistence. To keep Alex safe on the journey to Morbiberg, Jink suggested they travel together. Once they reached the capital, Jink planned to introduce Alec to his brother, Esther, and give him something to repay him for becoming his slave. Alec burst into tears and hugged Jink tightly to express his gratitude. Meanwhile, 3 people watched them from a distance, including an elf woman who found Jink intriguing. Jink's party had to battle the remaining orc hordes to cross the border. Eventually, they reached the Goblins' Forest. As the name suggests, the only creatures here should be goblins, which Jink can handle easily. He takes out many of them without much trouble, but their numbers are overwhelming. The rest of the party joins in to defeat them all. After the fight, everyone is exhausted and resting on the ground. One person asks Jink why he's the only one not badly injured, even though he was on the front line. Jink nervously chuckles and explains that it might be because of his strength advantage. Technically, he's not wrong, because his ability to enchant objects with magic has boosted his physical capabilities. The elf girl from earlier interrupted him and called him impressive. She introduced herself as Karen, the leader of the party's Sacred Flame. A man with her introduced himself as Bogard. The third person of the party took a good look at Jink and figured out that he was an enchanter. This suddenly put a smile on his face, and he excitedly introduced himself as Will. Jink shook Will's hand and checked the status of their party. He noted that they were an A-ranked party with highly skilled members. Will had the skill weapon appraisal mentioned in his status. Jink wondered if this was how Will figured out his enchanting ability. He asked Will how he knew. Will replied that he saw that all Jink's equipment was imbued with physical enhancement +8, which was a feat achieved by enchanters only, as it was challenging to enhance multiple pieces of equipment with the same value. The adventurers around him heard the conversation and started bombarding Jink with questions. Will inquired if Jink would be willing to enchant something for him at a reasonable price. Jink answered that certain conditions had to be met for performing this ability. The owner's blood had to be dropped on the object to be enchanted. In that case, only the owner could use the enchantment effects on the equipment. Alternatively, Jink would have to go through Morbiberg. Jink forbade the party from telling anyone about this ability until he was officially on the same level as them. The party members agreed to his terms. Will stated that they were all adventurers of Qual, and they would have loved to have an enchanter in their country. Jink was open to any price for enchantments because he had never met enchanters before, so he didn't know the usual prices. He offered them some cards and explained how each could be used. Will was shocked to learn that Jink could provide appraisal, magic bag, and alchemy magic with his rare ability. All 3 members had their equipment enchanted. The only card left was an appraisal one for all 3. However, Jink was very tired by this point. He kept drinking mana potions to stay energized. The members dripped some of their blood on the cards to enchant them. Will was pleased with his appraisal card. He asked Jink if he knew their talents, since the card only listed their skills. Jink replied that talents were uncertain. Some people's talents might never develop, so they weren't listed on the card. The adventurers of the Sacred Flame gave Jink a hefty sum of gold and valuable items in exchange for enchantment services. Will found it odd that Jink, who possessed many rare items, was traveling without a caravan. When asked, Jink revealed that he had been exiled. This revelation shocked them, prompting inquiries into the reason. Jink explained that he had always been shunned by others, so being falsely accused was inevitable. He had kept his abilities secret, even from his own family. Fearing exploitation by those in power, he harbored distrust toward everyone. Will expressed gratitude for Jink's honesty and invited him to accompany them to the Qual Kingdom, assuring him of a warm reception. There were many monsters on the border, but with Jink and his companions together, getting through them was easy. Jink agreed to join them, and they began their journey. They quickly arrived at Morbiberg. Since no one recognized Jink there, he decided to go shopping. Jink happily purchased various items, including an armor suit and a spear for Esther. The shopkeeper was surprised to see such a young boy buying expensive items. Jink paid for everything and took all the items with him. He did his best to enchant the items intended as gifts for Esther. Jink consumed many mana potions and spent the entire night enchanting. The next day, he handed a package to Alec to take to Esther. He also gave everyone cards showing their statuses. He practiced a lot of enchanting magic because he wanted to level up his skills. He said goodbye to Alec's group and headed to the border with Sacred Flame. Back at the non-land residence, Esther was put under house arrest for 50 days. His father declared Esther as the new heir and told him to forget about his brother. Alone in his room, Esther cried as he remembered Jink. After Jink left, Esther's father would often beat him when he found out Esther had been doing things he didn't approve of. Esther would get scolded for going against his father's wishes, and as punishment, he was confined to the house for 50 days. His father even declared that Jink was no longer part of the family. Locked away in his room, Esther worried about his brother's well-being. Despite the situation, he had faith that Jink was still alive and doing all right somewhere out there. Meanwhile, in another country, Jink was busy fighting monsters. He would often mention Esther's name, expressing how hard he was working. Jink was joined by members of the Sacred Flame who fought alongside him. Will, using his wind cutter magic, effortlessly sliced through a giant monster. Jink was impressed by Will's A-ranked skills and was told that he would soon level up with his enchantment skills. Will admitted he was better with flame magic, but the forest restricted its use. Karen and Bogard finished off the remaining monsters. Curious if lower-ranked adventurers could now cross the border since they had cleared out most of the monsters, Jink asked Karen. She explained that this area was still off-limits for adventurers ranked C or lower. When merchants crossed the border, they usually had guards ranked A or B with them. Going deeper meant risking encounters with wyverns, which scared Jink a lot. Jink and the party had reached the country's border. Massive gates stood before them, guarded by several guards. Jink wondered if they could pass through smoothly because it was said that nobody exiled had ever slipped past the border. Karen and Bogard reassured him, promising to intervene if things didn't go as expected. A ranker was treated like an earl or count, while an S-ranker was like a duke. Inspectors there were ranked up to viscounts at most, so their party had authority over them. A guard suddenly appeared and requested their IDs. He was shocked to see Jink's ID, realizing he was Jink Nonland, who had been exiled. He asked how Jink had managed to get there in just 5 days. Karen stepped forward and asked why it mattered. She pointed out that he had been ordered to leave the country, and he had complied, so there shouldn't be anything to complain about. The guard got offended and yelled at her, questioning how a commoner could speak to him like that. Karen shoved her ID in the guard's face, and he started sweating when he realized she was an S-ranked adventurer. Karen threatened him, saying she would test her weapon on him if he didn't shut his mouth. The guard got scared and ran away. A higher-ranked guard showed up and said sorry to them for his subordinate's behavior. He asked why people from the Kual Kingdom were traveling with someone like Jink, whom he described as a disrespectful man. The guard said Jink had apparently tried to poison the head of his family to get their money. Jink was shocked to hear this new accusation of attempted murder. He figured his family must have really disliked him to make up such stories. Will explained to the guard that they were only escorting Jink because they heard he had been exiled. According to the kingdom's rules, when someone gets exiled, they had to leave the country within a certain time and never return. Jink followed the rules, so nobody should stop him. But the guard thought the time Jink took was too quick, which seemed suspicious. Will stood up for Jink, saying that they'd been traveling together for 3 days and had no issues with him. The guard tried to argue more, but eventually gave up and let them go. They reached the territory of the Kual Kingdom. Jink thanked Will and the others for their help throughout the journey. Will asked him if he had ever considered how the Rosalta Kingdom would react if they found out he was an enchanter. He explained they might try to take him back, or even eliminate him. That's why he suggested Jink register with the Kual Kingdom. If he found a job in town and leveled up regularly, he could eventually reveal he was an enchanter on his own terms. The people of Kual would support him, and as long as he was registered with Kual, Rosalta couldn't harm him. Jink agreed to the idea and decided to visit the guild. Will gave Bogart some instructions that Jink didn't understand. Later, Jink excitedly told Karen he had enchanted a healing card for her, and she happily accepted it. When Karen and the guy reached the Adventurers Guild, everyone glanced at Karen. They seemed fascinated by her presence. Some looked envious that she was accompanied by a new guy. They asked the receptionist for registration details. The guy then asked Jink to display the things he had hunted previously. Jink suggested they move to a larger area for this. Then they all moved to the guild's backyard. Jink took out some bags from his item box. The bags were filled with goblins' ears. He didn't have time to dissect orcs, so he brought their bodies with him. He angled the opening of the item box towards the ground, and numerous orcs started falling. The guys assessing him froze in their places, their mouths hanging open. Converting all the stuff into money made a total of 24.3 million yen. Jink was elated that he had earned this much money. He could never dream about getting his savings up to 6 digits when he was Jinkaroo. He had accumulated enough points to rank up to level C, but he still had to pass a rank-up test to attain that level officially. He was going to have a mock fight with the examiner for that test. he got guided to the battleground. A man appeared behind him and introduced himself as the guildmaster, Snow. He stated that he would be the one fighting Jink. News quickly spread throughout the guild that the master was personally testing someone. People were curious about the challenger's skills. At the testing area, the referee announced that they would combine rank D and C tests to save time. The guildmaster expressed interest in testing the challenger, Jink. Despite warnings from the referee about the risks, the guildmaster was eager to participate. Karen reassured him from the crowd, offering to heal any injuries. This drew anger from some men in the audience who resented Karen's attention towards the guildmaster. The referee signaled the start of the fight. The guildmaster attacked first, charging fast at Jink. Jink barely dodged in time. The master began a series of attacks that Jink tried to dodge. He was so swift with his attacks that Jink couldn't keep up and got a minor hit on his cheek. The master mentioned that usually opponents gave up after 3 minutes, so it was impressive that Jink was still standing. It had been a while since he faced this kind of resistance. This time, Jink tried to initiate an attack, but the master easily dodged it. Jink noted that his swordsmanship level was 104, so it wasn't surprising that he was this good. They continued trying to attack each other. The audience was impressed by Jink for keeping up with the master. The guildmaster started to get tired, but Jink remained unfazed. He applauded Jink for holding up against him for so long and declared that it was time to finish this. Both of them charged at each other simultaneously. Using his enchantment, Jink ducked down, avoiding the master's attack and landed a hit on his torso. The audience was shocked when they saw the match's outcome. The master fell to his knees, admitting defeat. Karen rushed over and offered to help heal him. Weakly, the master said a potion would do. Karen then turned to Jink, poking his cheeks, saying she'd heal him instead. Jink blushed, saying he wasn't even hurt. Will approached, clapping, impressed that Jink had defeated the guildmaster. He asked for the secret, and Jink hesitantly confessed he had redone the enchantment on his gear. Will then loudly announced that Jink had been an enchanter all along. Everyone at the venue was shocked by this revelation. The guildmaster couldn't believe that Jink was an enchanter because there were only 3 in the world. Will assured him of Jink's ability, mentioning his membership in the Sacred Flame. He showed the master his appraisal card to prove that Jink also had the skill. Sweating, the master tried to process everything. Jink reassured him, saying he was strong and wouldn't have won without enchantments. The master nervously chuckled and declared Jink a temporary C-ranked adventurer. Jink celebrated at first, but then he started to worry when he realized his rank was just temporary. He asked Will why he wasn't a full rank yet. Will explained that enchanters automatically start at S rank, but until it's official, he's stuck as a temporary C. It was important for the guild to see his abilities in combat, because if he wasn't good enough, the government would send guards to watch him all the time. Jink wondered why Will was helping him so much. Will was surprised by the question, but then grinned, saying he wanted to see what kind of story Jink would create. He promised that with his enchantment and assessment skills, Jink might even reach SS rank, which is higher than S and comes with freedom from authority. Jink could become like a feudal lord if he succeeded. Will asked if Jink was up for the challenge, knowing it would take a lot of effort. Thinking about all the unfair treatment he endured, Jink saw this as a chance to prove himself with his enchantment. He was determined to work hard and achieve SS rank. Jink sat inside a carriage surrounded by guards as he studied hard for an upcoming entrance exam. About halfway through the month, a commotion erupted outside. Jink, hearing the chaos, exited the carriage to assist his guards. Kobolds had launched an attack, and the guards were engaged in combat. Thinking it was an opportunity to test his water magic, Jink conjured a water ball and hurled it at the kobolds, blocking their path. However, the water merely soaked the kobolds without harming them. Realizing his mistake, Jink fled, focusing on making his next attack stronger and faster. Concentrating, he created a larger, more powerful water ball, which swiftly overwhelmed the kobolds in its path. After they managed to defeat all the monsters, a guard asked if Jink had used enchantment for the previous attacks too. Jink clarified that he already had an aptitude for water magic. The guard apologized to him for interrupting his studies and letting him fight, even though they were there to protect him. Jink reassured them that it was alright, and that it helped him get some magic training. 2 weeks earlier, Will and Bogart had taken him to a count's mansion, saying that they would stay the night there. Jink protested a little, thinking that staying with a noble might not be a good idea. Will defended Count Brand, saying that he drew a line between himself and the snobbish nobles, and had helped Will when he started out too. Jink gave in and entered the palace. Count Brand respectfully shook Jink's hand and introduced himself. Jink politely responded to the Count's greeting. The Count had prepared a meal for them, so they all headed to the dining table. Jink felt excited when he saw all the food because he had been surviving on preserved foods for a while. During the meal, the Count asked Jink about his future plans. Jink explained that he planned to travel through Qual while trying to rank up. Eventually, he aimed to leave the Qual Kingdom and settle in the Kingdom of Yamato. He intended to enroll in Yamato Royal Academy, but he achieved S rank much faster than he had expected. The Count reassured him that his high rank guaranteed his status now, and he didn't need to go all the way to Yamato to avoid interference from Rosalta. Jink insisted that he wanted to explore the world and have more adventures. The Count suggested he visit Qualarut, the capital of Qual, where the esteemed Qual Royal Academy is located. It's quite challenging to get into, but with Jink's status, it would be easier. For a thrilling experience, the Count recommended Gamel, a city built atop Qual's largest dungeon, rumored to have over 80 floors filled with various monsters. Karen mentioned that Jink would need to pass an entrance exam to get into the academy. Jink decided he would study during his travels to Qualarut. The Count proposed having an adventurer party accompany him, taking a route friendly territories as much as possible. Once in the capital, Jink could stay at the Count's estate. If he ran into any trouble, he could use the Count's name for assistance. Jink didn't understand why the Count was so willing to help him. The Count explained that he had a son Jink's age who was currently preparing for the exam, and he saw this as an opportunity for his son to make a new friend. Reflecting on his life as Jinkero, Jink realized that he had been stuck in the same routine for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be passionate and excited about something new. But now, those feelings were coming back to him. Jink thanked the Count and the members of the Sacred Flame for their assistance. They shared their own plans and wished him luck on his journey. Returning to the present, throughout the journey, all Jink did was study. He met many people, fought numerous monsters, and even enchanted items for his escort party and the nobles he encountered all while studying. Dark circles had formed around his eyes by then. A guard informed him that they had reached the capital. Exiting his carriage, he exclaimed excitedly when he saw the enormous border wall, which was twice as big as Rosa's border. Jink wanted to explore the city, but his guard stopped him and asked him to wait until all official procedures were completed. After they crossed the wall, they arrived at Count Brand's house. Count Brand's wife, Maria, and his son, Chris, greeted them warmly. Chris immediately offered to give them a tour of the house, while Maria suggested that Jink should take a rest. Chris insisted it was fine and asked Jink to come along, but Jink collapsed from exhaustion. Chris and Maria became worried and called for a doctor. While lying motionless on the ground, Jink realized that his appraisal level had reached its maximum. Meanwhile, at the Qual Royal Palace, news spread that an enchanter had entered the country. The king, seated on the throne, asked if this information was confirmed. A butler confirmed it and mentioned that the enchanter wished to join the Royal Academy. The king decided that they needed to assess the enchanter's character and abilities. At the Qual Royal Academy, the entrance exam begins. Jink easily solves the exam, as this exam is only more challenging by this world's standards. Japanese exams are more complicated, and besides, he had studied till he literally passed out. Also, more points are allocated to the physical exam, so he should be fine. For the physical exam, they have a high-ranked appraisal expert assessing students' skills. He confirms that Jink indeed possesses enchantment and appraisal magic. He also notes that his specialty is water magic, and he has some skill in recovery magic. They move on to the demonstration part of the exam, and Jink shows off his water magic. After all exams, Jink is walking through a hall with Chris. Chris tells him that the written exam was not as bad as he thought. Thanks to Jink's help, he also praises the water cyclone that Jink demonstrated. Jink had used enchantment, so the ground ended up flooded after his water cyclone demonstration. Jink assumes that the old man who assessed him, Marcus Panam, would tell the king about his enchantment as he is a high-ranked individual. The fact that he is an enchanter might reach Rosalta sooner than expected. At the royal palace, the king inquires about Marquis about Jink's status. Marquis tells him that Jink is also skilled in swordsmanship and body reinforcement, on top of enchantment. Moreover, he also has an extra-large item box. The King of Qual, Normal Qual, finds it interesting. Marquis further adds that he has also scored 96% on the written exam, which is one of their all-time high scores. Undoubtedly, Jink would place first in the Magic Department entrance exam. One panel member suggested they needed to win over a prodigy like him. The king asked about his personality. They had heard that he tried to poison his father, so if an influential person like him had evil intentions, he would have posed a threat to Qual. Marquis answered that he had not seen any criminal titles when he appraised him, but for someone belonging to House Nonland, his spearmanship skill had been strikingly low. He believed that Rosalta had spread false information about him and exiled him unjustly. Due to this, Jink did not respect nobles and authority figures. If they wanted to reach out to him, they should have done it with caution. The king wondered why Rosalta would exile him for such an insignificant reason, such as having no talent in spearmanship. They might have had some ulterior motive. They must have exiled him without knowing he was an enchanter. The king stood up and declared that Jink was now under their protection, but they would not have used his powers for their own interest. A few days later, Chris happily told Jink that he had placed first in the exam. They were both chosen as first-class students. Jink also congratulated him for securing second place. Chris informed Jink that the king would be inviting him for an audience soon. He asked if he possessed any formal clothes because he had only seen him in casual clothes so far. Jink told him that he had sold his fancy clothes after getting exiled. They decided to go shopping. Jink had to search for a place to live too, now that the exams were over. Jink went to Qual Slave Trading Company because he needed human resources. Slave trading was very common in this world, but Jink could never get used to it. He spotted a girl with a good aptitude rank and asked about her. The trader told him that her name was Nina and she was 12 years old. The original plan was to use her for other wrong things, but she was damaged in transport by a pack of wild dogs, so now she was there as a general slave. Jink told him that he had decided to take her. The man asked Jink to put a drop of his blood on her throat to start the subordination ritual. Jink did so, and the man started reciting the ritual. When it was over, the girl bowed down before Jink and declared herself as his subordinate. Back at Count Brand's home, Jink began a conversation by asking Nina about her origins. She explained that her parents were poor farmers who had to sell her because they couldn't afford to feed her. They felt relief after letting her go. Sensing it was a sensitive topic, Jink decided to stop asking questions about it. Instead, he outlined his 5 rules for her. She had to obey him without question, not harm him, never lie to him, keep his secrets, and not put him at a disadvantage. As long as she followed these rules, she had some freedom. Even though he was technically her master, he didn't want to overwork her. He assured her that he wouldn't hurt or punish her for small mistakes, and encouraged her to talk to him directly if something went wrong. Nina then asked if it was okay for her to avoid doing any inappropriate tasks, considering her past as a damaged slave. Jink was startled by the question, and told her that he had never expected anything like that from her in the first place. She argued that it was the only thing she was suitable for. She couldn't do manual labor and couldn't read or write. Her parents had called her useless before getting rid of her. She got angry while quoting her parents' words. Jink gave her an X potion and asked her to heal herself with it. Nina was surprised that he was giving such a valuable item to a slave. Jink consoled her by telling her positive points about herself. He said that he had chosen Nina for her talent in cooking, and she had room for growth in other skills too. He held her shoulder and told her he needed her help in achieving his goals. Nina had cried when someone showed her kindness for the first time, and she thanked them. After a few days, Chris told Jink that Nina had quickly gotten better at cooking. Jink looked sick, his face pale, and his stomach bloated from drinking too many mana potions. He was desperate for money, so he'd been trying to use alchemy on Junk. Their conversation was interrupted when Nina showed up with a jar of cookies. She was dressed in a cute maid outfit, and all her scars had vanished. She gave Jink some cookies and then left. After she left, Jink asked Chris if he knew any slaves who were good at fighting. Chris told him about the criminal slave office, a place where violent people were kept. Jink stood in the academy hallway thinking about saving up money for a combat slave. Chris joined him, and they chatted about going to classes that day. As they walked through the hallway, all the girls admired Jink, and Chris teased him for being so popular. Jink told Chris that being the center of attention didn't make him happy because those girls were only interested in his status, not him. He said if he married them, they would drain him of every penny. Chris agreed, adding that these girls seemed to be from lower-ranking noble families, eager to marry someone of higher status. Jink believed these girls should focus on supporting themselves before trying to marry into wealth. A lovely girl walked in and greeted Jink. She said her name was Najenda Qual, and she was a top student from the statecraft department. Jink was amazed to hear this, because she had the title of the first princess of the kingdom. He and Chris immediately bowed respectfully and greeted her back. Najenda told them to relax and not be so formal. Since they were in the same year, she wanted them to be closer friends. Jink mentioned that he was an adventurer and would be out exploring most of the time, so they might not see each other much. Nagenda replied that she would also be busy assisting her father with government matters. Jink and Chris were clearly impressed by her. Suddenly, they heard a big guy bothering a student. Jink asked Nagenda about the guy. She told him that the guy was Duke Rancel's heir. Back in junior academy, he used his father's name to do whatever he wanted. It reached a point where many students quit the academy because of his actions. It seemed he got into this academy as a third-class student. His father was good at covering things up, so he never faced consequences for his actions. The guy made his way to Jink and the others. He greeted Nagenda, but she replied rudely. Then he turned to Jink and offered him to join his family's service, saying he would make excellent use of Jink's S-rank ability. He mocked Jink, saying that as a mere commoner, he should consider serving his family in honor. Jink got upset by his words and punched him in the face. He told him that being noble doesn't matter at this school. Here, your status is determined by your class. So if a lower-class student like him disrespects a higher-class student, the lower-class student can be punished right away. Jink left the guy there and walked off with Chris and Nagenda. Nagenda asked Jink if he was going to accept her father's invitation for a meeting. Jink said he'd like to, but he didn't have fancy clothes and he needed his money for other things. The princess told him to wear his usual clothes since he was an adventurer. A few days later, Jink showed up before the king. The king greeted him warmly and said sorry for the trouble caused by some of his country's nobles, who kept asking Jink to make appraisal cards during his travels. Jink replied that he didn't mind because he made good money from it. Then the king asked if they could rely on him for future enhancement and appraisal requests. Jink felt happy that the king acknowledged his enchantment side job and agreed to help. The king then asked about Jink's quarrel with Duke Rancel's heir. Jink explained that he couldn't stand people who abused their power and act selfishly. Like Duke Rancel's heir, he admitted to reacting impulsively and said he'd accept any punishment from the king. The king praised him for his beliefs and told him not to worry about what might happen because of the argument. He congratulated Jink for coming first in the written exam and offered to reward him with whatever he wanted. Jink said he wanted permission to buy human resources from the criminal slave sales office. He explained that he needed slaves to help him explore Gamel's labyrinth and was worried about spies from Rosalta sneaking in. He thought slaves were the safest choice. The king admired his clever plan and gave him permission to buy the criminal slaves. Jink and Nina went to the criminal slave sales office. As they walked through different cells with criminals, Nina felt scared. In one cell, Jink noticed a slave who caught his eye. He thought the guy had potential for growth and combat skills. Curious, Jink asked the guy about his crime. The guy explained that he had a troubled relationship with his father's second wife. She tried to kill him to inherit his father's wealth, and he ended up accidentally killing her in self-defense. Nina told Jink that the guy's price was too high. Jink wanted to buy him, but it would drain all his money. Plus, he still needed to find a place to live. He wondered why no noble had bought such an impressive guy. When he asked the guard said people were scared of him because of his crime. Ian interrupted by saying that his father wanted to repurchase him, but his price was 10 times higher for family members. His father couldn't gather that much money, and he lost the courage to face his family. Nina told Jink that she didn't find this guy scary. Unlike other criminals, Nina's words gave Jink the final push he needed to make his decision. He announced that he would buy Ian. At Count Brand's wife's request, King Qual gifted Jink a mansion. Chris also gathered more requests for appraisal cards for Jink. Nina practiced reading, writing, and cooking. Ian trained his wind magic and swordsmanship, and he showed impressive progress as expected. However, Jink noticed that Ian looked worried sometimes. Jink encouraged him to talk openly, but Ian didn't say anything. Deciding to ask directly, Jink and Ian headed to the market. While there, they noticed a guy in a cloak who seemed to be following them. Jink and Ian were out shopping for things they wanted. After they finished shopping, Jink reminded Ian to speak up if he had any concerns, as being forgetful could be risky during fights. Suddenly, a young boy appeared, pointing a spear at Jink. He demanded that Jink stop using his brother however he pleased and let him go, or else they would have to fight. Jink checked the boy's strength and saw it was much weaker compared to Ian's. The boy even had a title that said Ian's Leftovers. Jink mentioned he was a top-ranked adventurer, and the boy wasn't in a position to fight him. The boy yelled again for Ian to be set free. Jink, getting annoyed, said he couldn't release Ian because he had bought him for a high price. Amidst the chaos ahead, Ian knelt down and said sorry to Jink on behalf of his brother, pleaded with Jink to spare his brother's life. Ian's brother yelled at him, telling him not to kneel before someone like Jink. The people around them started talking, and Jink realized he looked like the bad guy in front of everyone. Ian asked his brother how he couldn't hate him for taking their mother's life. Ash, the younger brother, said he was mad at him for that, but he found it disgraceful that he was treated like a slave. He wanted his smart and cool brother back. Their father had promised to save money to buy him, but someone bought him before that could happen. Jink interrupted and declared that he would entertain Ash as an opponent, drawing his sword. Ash charged at him with a spear, but Jink quickly cut it in two with his sword. Then he sliced Ash's cloak in half, causing him to fall to the ground. At that time, some guards showed up and tackled Ash to the ground. They were from the guild, and one of them asked Jink to come to the guild for a hearing. Jink told Ian to quickly stash all the shopping in his item box. They'd talk more later. When Jink got home, he was worn out. Nina ran to him crying and led him to Ian's room, where he found Ian attempting to take his own life. Jink grabbed the weapon away from him, but Ian protested, shouting that he deserved to die for disrespecting his family. Jink argued that it wouldn't solve anything and asked for a different punishment. Jink got angry and announced that they would leave for the dungeon city, Gamal, the next day. While they were exploring, Ian was being worked like a horse, doing everything that was asked of him. Eventually, Ian made a vow that he would keep working until he couldn't anymore. He asked Jink about Ash's situation, and Jink explained that Ash had been placed in the guild's isolation cell for a few days, but wouldn't face any further punishment. Ian thanked Jink for the lenient treatment and explained that Ash had been spoiled growing up, but he was still Ian's precious brother. Talking about his brother reminded Jink of Esther. He mentioned that he understood the feeling of having a precious brother and hoped that his own brother was doing well. Meanwhile, back at Nonland's residence in Rosalta, Elsa sat on a bed looking sick and exhausted with Esther by her side. Esther tried to comfort her by saying that he was sure Jink was fine, but he was worried about Elsa's condition because Jink was like a child to her. As he left Elsa's room, a boy appeared and asked him to return to the annex. Esther argued that he was still on the property and his father wasn't here, so it shouldn't be a big deal. The butler pointed out that Esther still seemed worried about Jink, the outcast. With an evil grin on his face, he advised Esther to forget about him since he was just a lowly criminal. Esther retorted that he must have been so bored now that the target of his teasing had left. As Esther started to leave, he reminded him of the times he had done petty things on the orders of the higher-ups. Esther regarded his brother as an amazing person. Esther believed that if anyone called his brother an outcast, they didn't really know him. In the past, to meet the expectations of the higher-ups as an heir, he trained with spears every day. This inspired Esther to learn spearmanship too. Jink was decent with the spear, but Esther quickly surpassed him. Whenever they sparred, Esther always won. Jink even asked Esther for tips to improve his skills. Esther knew Jink felt embarrassed being beaten by the son of a concubine, but he still treated Esther kindly. However, people's attitudes towards Jink changed a lot. His grandfather started favoring him and ignoring Jink. It was clear that rumors about Jink were being spread on purpose. Over time, the rumors got worse, and Jink found himself with nobody to rely on. Esther believed he was the one who had ruined his brother's life. At the Rosalta Royal Palace, a meeting took place. Noble Nonland, the former head of the family, and the kingdom's crown prince Elliot were also present. The audience expressed their dissatisfaction, saying that exiling an enchanter was a grave mistake. They added that it would be very difficult to retrieve him since he had escaped to Qual. Interrupting them, the crown prince asked how long they intended to dwell on this argument. A member of the council replied that since the crown prince had supported Jink's exile, he also had to bear responsibility. The prince confessed that he had assumed Jink would be taken care of by goblins or kobolds, but luck was on his side, allowing him to reach Qual. He remarked that Jink being an enchanter was actually good news, because it implied that he and his father also had the talent for enchanting. The king scolded him and tried to halt his speech, but Elliot persisted, stating that Jink shared the same bloodline as his father. He argued that since he and his father shared the same blood, they too could become enchanters like Jink. The council members were shocked when they found out. They wondered if Jink could be the king's secret son. The king looked nervous and asked Elliot how he found out. Elliot said he overheard his father and grandfather talking. He said he'd be the one to save the country. He told a guard to tell his followers. They had to find the smartest sages and wizards in Rosalta. They needed to figure out how to make him and his dad into enchanters. The king and the former king seemed dismayed, and everyone at the council began questioning them aggressively. Gordon held his head in his hands. observing the chaos unfolding before him. He had opposed punishing him with exile and had suggested granting him a Viscount title instead. He understood that this wouldn't just end with him and his father. The public would soon uncover the lie that the non-land family and the royal family had desperately tried to conceal. Sacred Flame and Alec arrived at Non-Land's residence to meet Esther. They all introduced themselves to him and Will informed him of Jink's whereabouts. Esther started crying at the confirmation that his brother was doing fine. Esther brought them to meet Elsa. Elsa was very relieved to hear about him too. Will told them about Jink being an enchanter too. Esther realized why Jink had asked for his blood when he saw the gift sent by Jink. Elsa said that she did not notice Jink's enchanting abilities at all, while she took care of him. She understood why Jink hid this from everyone all that time. If that had gotten out, this country would have definitely tried to steal his freedom. Will was certain, because he had only heard bad things about Rosalta in recent years, and the poisoning incident involving the Chancellor's family had sparked it all. That incident had only occurred because the Chancellor's daughter had Jink, with his father being the king. Esther's eyes widened at the revelation. Will realized that he had said more than necessary, and Karen hit him for not being careful in front of Esther. Esther seemed horrified after discovering that he and Jink were not blood-related. Elsa comforted him and continued the story from where Will had left off. Previous king of Rosalta had gotten the crown with the support of the Chancellor. Shortly after, the Chancellor's daughter became pregnant with his child. If this secret had gotten out, it would have made the king's position worse. So he tried hard to keep it hidden. He had ways to handle it, but dealing with the Chancellor's daughter, who was influential, was tricky. Eventually, the pregnant lady carrying Jink was sent to House Non-Land, which was powerful, to marry Lord Gordon. Elsa, who used to work as a servant at the Chancellor's house, was sent with her. However, the former head of House Non-Land, Lord Noble Non-Land, didn't like this arrangement. He didn't want to pass on his family's legacy to a child who wasn't related to him, so he poisoned the food at one of the Chancellor's family gatherings. Jink didn't attend the party because he wanted to practice his spearmanship, and Elsa stayed with him. Everyone at the party, including Jink's mother and her family, met their end. Even Elsa's husband and son, who were serving at the party, were affected. Elsa was silenced by Noble and Gordon. She felt guilty for allowing Jink to be exiled just to save herself. Esther comforted her, saying she hadn't done anything wrong. The Non-Land family simply wanted to get rid of Jink, talented or not. Will told them that the capital was filled with criticism for the royal family. He also mentioned the Crown Prince's foolish behavior at the recent meeting. Chaos reigned in the royal palace. Will paid off a noble who was at the meeting to get this information. Rosalta was in deep trouble. After learning about the situation, Alec decided to move his group to Qual. Will asked Esther what he wanted to do. Esther replied that he didn't feel attached to the country or his family anymore. He demanded Karen, the leader of Sacred Flame, to take him in as her slave. He feared his family would be convicted and he'd be enslaved along with them. So he wanted to become Karen's slave and leave with Sacred Flame to meet up with Jink later. Elsa also insisted on becoming a slave with Esther. Outside the door, the rude butler listened to everything. He decided to grab some expensive stuff and leave the place because he thought the house was finished anyway. Karen dressed up Esther in a maid suit. Esther was extremely shy and embarrassed wearing that, but Karen had fun. She justified it by saying that Esther was a high-ranked noble successor, so he was pretty well known. It would have been impossible to make it through the inspection if he didn't disguise himself. Esther still didn't understand why he had to cross-dress. Even Elsa teased him about it. They all left for the Qual Kingdom right away. Esther still felt uneasy knowing that Jink was not his blood-related brother. Jink, Nina, and Ian arrived at Gamel. The city was bustling with people just as they expected. They gazed at the large entrance to the dungeon. Ian told them that in ancient times, the entrance used to be nothing more than a huge hole leading into the dungeon. As more adventurers began to arrive, the city started to grow. Jink noticed that Ian seemed quite knowledgeable about Gamel. Ian explained that his family had a shop branch here, so he had visited often with his father. His family mainly traded with mid-sized clans. Clans were essentially groups of adventurers. Small clans had just a few parties, while big clans could have several hundred members. Being part of a clan provided a safe base for adventurers to operate from, so most adventurers in Gamel belonged to one. Some clans even used their strength as a shield to get what they wanted, which made them intimidating trading partners for merchants. They decided to head to the guild first to gather some information. The guild was massive, feeling like one of those modern malls to Jink. As he was about to speak to the receptionist, a large drunken man interrupted him. He made fun of Jink and Nina, suggesting they hire guards if they didn't want trouble. The receptionist managed to get rid of him and apologized to Jink. Jink handed her his guild card, and she screamed when she saw his S rank. Everyone around was surprised. Some even thought about recruiting him to their group. Jink explained that his rank was because of his rare ability, but he still lacked experience. He was sent straight to the 5th floor, a place where many adventurers hadn't reached. While Jink and his team waited in the reception area, a girl named Mona showed up. She informed them that she would be their guide from now on. The guild provided personal assistance to adventurers based on their rank and skills. They could go to her for any help or advice they needed. Jink understood why other adventurers might be jealous of him. He greeted the dungeon guide and dove straight into business, asking about the necessary equipment and any important dungeon details. The guide explained that monsters would continuously appear, but the remains of those Jink defeated would vanish, leaving only a few items behind. These defeated monsters would eventually respawn. The items left behind, like magic stones or body parts, were called item drops, and they could also be found in treasure boxes scattered throughout the dungeon. Jink thought the dungeon seemed very organized, almost as if someone intentionally designed it that way. Mona advised him not to overdo things, warning that monsters got stronger the deeper he went. She mentioned that no one had made it to the deepest floors yet. Previous adventurers had said that the environment changed a lot from floor to floor. If one floor was hot, the next might be freezing cold, so he needed equipment for both hot and cold temperatures. Above all, quality footwear was necessary. She suggested he visit their guild store for the items he needed. After going over the basics, she informed Jink about a request the guild had for him. They needed him to gather magic stones. Due to a recent war, Qual was running low on magic stones, but not many adventurers were actively seeking them out. In this world, people used magic stones like batteries. They used the magic inside them to start fires and make water for everyday needs. Magic stones were super important for daily life, but low-ranked adventurers were too busy trying to survive, and the high-ranked ones didn't explore the lower levels because they were only interested in rare stuff. That's why Jink's group got the job. They were going to hunt slimes because they dropped magic stones. They went into the dungeon and found a big open space. After a bit, slimes started popping up from everywhere. Jink told Nina and Ian what to do to fight them. Nina struggled at first, so Jink had to help her, but she got the hang of it and managed to take down a bunch. Ian used his sword and wind magic to get rid of them too. When the slimes disappeared, they were left with a bunch of magic stones around them. Ian mentioned he wasn't even tired after the fight, all thanks to some enchantment. Jink explained that when you fought tough battles, your experience points went up in real time. He figured it was because the monster's energy turned into experience points. When he checked their stats, they had gone up a lot. They decided to challenge monster rooms to level up. According to the map, there were slime rooms on the 3rd floor, but only those above B rank were allowed there. Monster rooms were filled with specific kinds of monsters. Once you entered, you had to either survive for a set time or defeat all monsters before leaving. Jink told them that based on their enchantment, they were easily B rank, so they decided to go there. They reached the slime room on the 3rd floor. Hundreds of slime monsters came from all sides, more than they expected. Jink was confident that Ian could handle them, but he wasn't sure about Nina. When Nina got into trouble, he unleashed a massive water cyclone at them. The attack took out all the slimes at once. Jink had run out of mana after using the water cyclone attack, so he drank a mana potion to recharge. Nina felt sorry for the oversight and apologized to Jink. He reassured her, saying it was okay, and mentioned that both Nina and Ian's XP had increased due to his attack. It seemed that just being near the person who makes the shot could boost one's stats. Ian suggested it might be better for them to earn XP individually, so they continued battling slime monsters they encountered throughout the night. During the fights, Nina learned some shielding skills. Despite fighting numerous slimes, they didn't accumulate enough XP. They decided to move to another floor. Nina expressed her reluctance to enter a goblin room because she disliked their smell. Jink agreed, adding that goblins didn't drop good items either. The other options were kobolds on floor 9 and orcs on floor 15. They decided to go to the kobolds room because they had good item drops, and their smell was also slightly better than goblins. Orcs had thick skin, so their weapons wouldn't last against them. That's why kobolds were the best choice. Nina felt happy experiencing all the things adventurers did. They headed to the kobold's room on floor 9. There was a magic circle there, which was like a kobold's respawn point. After a few moments, kobolds started emerging from the circle. Ian and Jink started fighting them one by one. Nina also managed to defeat one after some effort. Jink built a tall water wall around them, keeping all the kobolds trapped outside. They decided to take a break inside the wall, grabbing loot and weapons as they went. Ian suggested they use magic instead of constantly moving around. Nina couldn't use magic, but Jink could enchant a weapon for her. Nina was thrilled at the idea of using magic. Jink pointed out that Nina didn't have enough mana for magic. Ian said she could manage with potions, though it might cost a bit. Jink agreed and gave Nina an enchanted weapon that could only cast water balls. When Jink took down the water wall, the kobolds flooded in to attack. Nina kept hurling water balls and drinking mana potions. Jink put up another water wall after a while. After drinking many mana potions, Nina couldn't hold it anymore. Jink enchanted a box for her to pee in. Nina was embarrassed at first, but eventually found a spot to relieve herself. After 3 days, they finished off many orcs in the orc room on floor 15. Ian mentioned that he had gotten over his fear of orcs by then. Meanwhile, Nina was excited about cooking orc meat later. After 3 days of continuous fighting, Ian and Nina's stats had increased greatly. Jink announced that they would head back topside after conquering the next room. The next room contained an orc general. They planned that Nina would attack with spells from behind, while Jink and Ian would charge head-on, casting their own spells. The orc general emerged out of the magic circle and tried to attack them. Jink went first and landed some hits on it, while Ian and Nina launched magic attacks from behind. Ian went after Jink and fought the monster with his sword, easily managed to bring the general down with their coordination and teamwork. After the orc general was defeated, Nina collected its meat to cook later. She then noticed a jiggly round thing with a weird smell. As a merchant's son, Ian knew what it was and told Jink. Jink instructed Nina not to hold it since it was an orc testicle. Soon after, Nina cooked her special orc meat soup and served it to Ian and Jink when they were back at their camp. As they ate, an elf guy appeared, following the smell of the dish. The guy seemed to recognize Jink. The elf guy introduced himself as Luke, the master of the Elder 3 clan. He felt good to finally meet Jink, the enchanter he had heard so much about. Jink checked Luke's status and found out that he was an S rank just like him. However, Luke didn't have any special abilities. Jink assumed Luke must have been incredibly skilled to reach S rank without any rare abilities. Luke's archery score was exceptionally high. Ian told Jink that Elder 3 was the 3rd most influential clan in Gamel. Jink asked Luke why he was there when several people standing behind Luke approached Jink and started begging for food. Luke explained that his clan had run out of food, so they were making their way back up from the floor below. However, with all the monsters, it was taking them a lot of time. They might have starved before making it back to the top side. Luke offered to pay money, but Jink said he would like some information in return for the food. Luke agreed to the deal as long as the information wasn't confidential. Nina cooked the whole clan a good meal. Everyone praised her cooking after eating. Luke said that he never expected to eat anything other than jerky and bread there. Jink told him that he had bought a lot of ingredients and cooking items just in case. While they were eating, Luke explained the clan system to Jink. He told him about the 2 main clans in Gamel, the Depths of Purgatory and the Emissaries. Some folks referred to them as the Big 3, including the Elder Tree. But Elder Tree was much smaller compared to the other 2. Both clans used force to maintain their hierarchies. Those with fewer abilities were often used as cannon fodder in the maze, either ending up dead or insane. Joining these clans meant paying steep membership fees. Some couldn't afford them, so they left. However, leaving a clan was seen as treason here, and no other clan would accept them. That's why some people ended up in Elder Tree, which prized freedom above all else. Luke wanted to help as many people leaving clans as he could, but he knew the other 2 clans would come after him. Ian confirmed that the 2 big clans had a bad reputation among merchants too. Despite this, their names still carried weight, and many joined because of their fame, only to regret it later. Jink thanked Luke for the valuable information, and together they made it to the top side. Luke expressed his gratitude for the meal and hoped they would meet again. He warned Jink to be cautious because he'd heard that the 2 clans had their eyes on him. After Luke left, Jink asked Ian and Nina about their maze experience. Nina said she had fun, while Ian talked about how effective the experience had been. Ian told Jink that he could form a clan of his own if they brought in the staff from the estate. Jink mentioned his upcoming exams, so they needed to return to the capital. He instructed Nina and Ian to take a break. The next day, Jink presented his loot from the past 3 days at the guild. Mona felt nervous seeing the amount of bags because now she would have to count them all. She spotted an orc's genitalia in one bag and happily picked it up, knowing it could be sold at a high price since it was used as an ingredient in medicines. At that moment, a man appeared and greeted Jink. He introduced himself as Dan, the guildmaster. Dan praised Jink for clearing a boss room in 3 days. He said Jink could take his provisional B rank exam now, with Dan as his opponent. It was a test of endurance. Jink had to withstand Dan's attacks for an hour. Dan wanted to see how someone who quickly rose through the ranks with rare skills could defend themselves. Jink thought the exam was a bit unfair for those who focused on offense. Mona assured him it was just a provisional exam and wouldn't change much. Dan interrupted, warning Jink not to be overconfident because he wouldn't hold back. The man teased Jink a bit more, and Jink started feeling annoyed by the man's behavior. Eventually, Jink and Dan moved to the Gamel Branch area to have the test once all the preparations were finished. Jink had enchanted every part of his outfit. Dan allowed him to use defensive spells and swords as long as he didn't actually hit him. Once the match began, Dan kept attacking Jink while Jink defended himself. Jink managed to endure 1 hour of constant attacks easily. Dan admitted that it was even tougher than Snow had warned him. Jink didn't even break a sweat during the whole thing. Dan also praised Jink for his accurate defense. Dan realized that Jink was quite intimidating during the match. Jink pretended to block Dan's attacks, but he was secretly targeting the same spot on Dan's sword repeatedly. If it had gone on much longer, Dan's sword could have broken. Eventually, Dan acknowledged his defeat. He invited Jink to the library later to talk about something. Mona had some less experienced adventurers count Jink's loot for her earlier. She told Jink about the huge amount he earned through that. Now they, along with Dan, sat in the library. Mona informed Jink that as a provisional B rank, he no longer needed an escort when traveling, although having some security was still a good idea. Dan disagreed, saying Jink could handle himself well enough. Jink then asked Dan about what he wanted to discuss. Dan explained Ash's situation. Although the guild had released him, his father still wanted to make amends, so he came to gamble. Dan requested Jink to talk to Ash and negotiate a deal with him. He suggested that Jink could sign with a merchant he knew since Ash needed to sell goods anyway. Dan felt sorry for the man as his eldest son ended up as a slave and his youngest son was causing trouble. He hoped Jink could lend a hand to help out. Jink's opinion of Dan instantly changed after hearing this. He had thought that Dan was a self-centered, rude man, but it turned out he was actually kind. Jink said he was going to deal with that matter anyway, so he would meet him. After a few days, Jink and Ian met Ian's father. His father apologized for Ash's rude behavior. Jink said he would let it slide if he promised to keep his son in check. Jink also received a personal business contract with him. With Ian's help, they worked out the details pretty quickly. After the meeting, Jink told Ian to spend the rest of the day with his family. Maid Mamisa and Angie welcomed Jink back to his house. They handed over a letter to him. Jink opened the letter and noted that it was from Chris. Chris wrote that there were 2 slaves named Elsa and Esther at the Brand's house and wanted to meet him. Jink was shocked when he read the names. Jink rushed to the Brand's residence. Chris told him that he used to be a prince. Jink's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when he heard that. Chris explained that he wasn't the oldest son of the Nonland family, but rather the illegitimate child of the King of Rosalta. This revelation had just come out, so the royal palace was in chaos. Will, Karen, and Bogard also appeared in front of Jink. Jink was confused about what was happening. He asked them to take him to Elsa and Esther. They led him to a quiet room. Elsa and Esther, wearing worn-out clothes with tired eyes, bowed their heads when Jink entered. Jink became furious seeing their condition and demanded to know who had done this to them. Karen replied that they had asked for it themselves. Chris explained that they had to do it because he and his mother couldn't treat slaves the same way they treated other servants. The servants would have caused an outrage, so they only asked to give them the bare minimum to survive. This was their atonement and apology to Jink. Jink didn't understand why Elsa and Esther would want an apology from him, so Will explained everything to him. He told him about the reason he got exiled and why Elsa and Esther believed that they were partially responsible for that. They became slaves, so Jink could punish them. It was all too much for Jink to take in. He first apologized to Chris and the Sacred Flame for putting them through trouble. Karen said that it was all right. She got to see Esther as a maid. Jink walked over to Elsa and Esther and asked them to stand up. He said he didn't want to punish them. He was just glad to see them okay. They didn't respond, so Karen had to tell Esther to lift his head. They both immediately apologized to Jink once they looked up. Esther apologized for his family's actions toward Jink, and Elsa apologized for not being able to protect him. Jink quickly told them not to blame themselves because none of it was their fault. When Esther respectfully called him Lord Jink, it made him angry. He yelled at Esther to stop, and then hugged him tightly, assuring him that they were still brothers. Esther started crying in Jink's arms, and then Elsa and Esther were brought inside. They changed back into their usual clothes too. Jink thanked the Sacred Flame members for everything and promised to enchant some items for them in return. He assured Esther that he would take care of him until he came of age. Jink expressed that he wanted to free Esther right away, but wouldn't be able to leave him alone until things settled in Rosalta. Being associated with Karen's name was better for them, since she was an S-rank adventurer. Esther and Elsa still insisted on serving Jink, but Jink shut them up. Jink's status had started showing King Rosalta's illegitimate child too. Will told them that the king and the crown prince had fallen from grace, leaving the throne empty. The queen also filed for divorce, and her home country dissolved their alliance with Rosalta. It was only a matter of time before a war broke out in Rosalta. Back in Rosalta, the former head of the Nonland family was sentenced to death, and Gordon Nonland was thrown into jail. The crown prince found himself confined within the walls of his palace. He grumbled about the nobles as he sat there until his father, the king, entered the room. Upon seeing his father, the prince turned to him, only to be struck by the king's scepter the moment he spoke. The king cursed his son, blaming him for everything that had gone wrong. He continued to beat the prince until the young man drew his final breath. In that moment, the prince realized he had departed from the world. Despite his death, he harbored a deep grudge against Jink, directing all his resentment towards him. He muttered Jink's name several times before a massive magic circle materialized in Gamel's dungeon. Jink stayed in the capital for 2 weeks and took his exams at the academy. After finishing his exams, he decided to return to Gamel with Esther and his group. Esther warmly greeted Ian and Nina when they arrived. Esther was wearing the armor that Jink had given him. Considering Esther's abilities, Jink thought it would be a good idea to spend 3 days repeatedly battling the orcs near the door, so Esther could get more practice. Jink believed that by the end of those days, Esther would be ready to join them in attacking the next floor. Ian questioned whether it was wise for Esther to start hunting orcs so soon. Esther reassured him, explaining that he had experienced hunting monsters during his guard duties for House Notland, and he had also fought some low-level monsters on the journey to Qual. However, it pained him to remember that he had done all that in a maid outfit. Jink informed Esther that he had an aptitude for wind magic, so on top of spearcraft, he should also level up his magic and mana. Nina asked Jink if Esther would have to drink a lot of mana potions like her, and he said yes. Nina got excited, thinking about how she would not be the only one feeling humiliated for having to pee. They got ready to leave for Gamel. Jink ordered Anzie and Mimosa to take care of the house while they were gone. Elsa also appeared with them in a maid uniform. Jink had given Anzie and Mimosa enchanted weapons, so they claimed that they would just use those weapons if things got bad. At Gamel, Jink introduced Esther to Mona. He asked if anything had changed while he was gone. Mona's expression darkened, and she asked Jink if he knew about named monsters. Jink admitted he had only heard about them. Mona explained that it was very rare, but sometimes the souls of the dead took over monsters. These monsters were called named monsters. They kept their memories, were intelligent, and could talk. They even looked like they did when they were alive. She told him that the orc general they had defeated on the 15th floor had come back to life as a named monster. Jink wondered if the monster had gotten stronger now that it had human intelligence. Mona assured him that it was the opposite. It had actually become weaker. She guessed that the monster must have had troubles in its previous life. Predicting the orcs' attacks used to be simple, but now it was even easier. It would spot women and immediately chase after them. Many weaker parties managed to defeat it by using female members as bait. They even started calling it Dork, combining orc and dork. With the 15th floor getting easier, there were problems with long lines forming before the 16th floor. Low-level adventurers took too much time clearing the 16th floor, leading to congestion and arguments in the queues. Mona asked Jink to assist anyone they encountered. Jink reassured her that he could enchant his entire party with healing abilities. On the 15th floor of Gamel, Esther battled some orcs using magic. He cast an attack called Air Slicer, which took down most of them. Ian noticed Esther's progress and improvement in just a few days. Esther also felt pleased with his own growth and improvement. Jink admitted he had been a bit worried if Esther could do more than just thrust with a spear, but now he was even using slicing techniques. Nina wondered how Esther managed not to take breaks while constantly chugging potions. They took a short break before deciding to move on to the next floor. Esther's level had jumped from 23 to 57 in 3 days. Now, they only needed to defeat the orc general to advance. Jink insisted on taking the front line, even though the general was weakened, just to be cautious. He also suggested Nina stay in the back, as the monsters behaved strangely around women. The orc general appeared from a swirling magic circle chanting Jink's name. Jink checked its status and found out it was Elliot, the crown prince. Jink announced what it saw in its status. As the orc approached Jink, he said it must have been fate for them to meet like this. He declared he would handle it himself. He sent some fire attacks at it, but the orc didn't even get a scratch. Jink had expected him to use fire magic since he had recently learned it, but it seemed he wasn't very good at it yet. The orc noticed Esther and started shouting, "Woman, woman, woman!" Esther got angry and yelled that he was a man attacking the orc with his spear. Jink took advantage of the situation and attacked from behind. The creature spotted Jink and started chanting his name again. It aggressively launched attacks, but Jink dodged everything and ended it with a single blow to its head. Esther informed him that the crown prince had been dethroned as per Will's report, suggesting he was likely executed afterward. Jink commented that he'd heard souls with strong resentments were more likely to be reborn as monsters, implying Elliot must have held a grudge. Jink felt it was deserved. By possessing a monster in Gamel, Elliot's spirit would be trapped there forever. He would keep coming back, endlessly respawning, only to be defeated by adventurers for experience points and items. Jink and the others kept fighting more monsters along the way until they reached the 20th floor. This floor was the most popular within the dungeon, known as the Crystal Area. It was packed with various kinds of crystals and stones, and many adventurers were milling about. Jink mentioned that he wanted to earn some money, and from what he had heard, rough emeralds and diamonds could be found here. Nina and Esther eagerly offered to do some mining. Jink took out mining tools from his item box, and Ian suggested a specific spot for Esther to mine. Using his material appraisal skill, he could assess the geological features of minerals. Nina, Esther, and Ian dug at different spots. Nina and Esther were excited when they found emeralds. Jink found it amusing to see them having fun like that, considering they were just kids. Ian also enjoyed the digging, but his motivation was different. He was focused on selling the stones to make money. Meanwhile, Jink decided to create a golem using minerals. He had been practicing earth magic and wanted to use the golem for mining. He used mana to sustain it, but the golem couldn't last long without it. The guilds used to warn about many traps and dangers down below. That's why they'd sometimes use the golem to trick enemies. When Jink and the others heard noise nearby, the golem began mining while they investigated. Turns out it was the depths of Purgatory and the Emissaries, two lower-ranked clans having a spat. Jink thought it was pretty silly. Moving on to the 21st floor, it looked more like a sunny field than a dungeon. Jink mentioned the creatures called green calves living there. Their meat was a delicacy, even better than orc meat. Jink and Esther had it back when they were nobles, but finding it in big cities was hard, so it cost a lot. Just thinking about it made Nina hungry. Suddenly, Jink remembered Mona mentioning more casualties lately. Hoping they'd stay safe, they kept going. Nearby, some huge ants were feeding on human bodies. Shortly after, Jink hunted green calves relentlessly until he was satisfied with the amount of meat he had collected. Nina then took out her knife and prepared to cook the meat, and Esther offered to assist her. The group enjoyed their meal, finding the calves' meat even better than they had anticipated. As they observed numerous white cows and minotaurs in the area, Ian realized that it was teeming with bovine-type monsters. While white cow meat tasted similar to that of green calves, their milk was exceptionally delicious. Conversely, minotaur meat was unpalatable and primarily useful for crafting, as their axes were too heavy for humans to wield. At that moment, Jink noticed that Esther had leveled up his wind magic and suggested trying out the air tornado spell he had been practicing. Esther was blessed as he could now provide support to the group. However, Jink cautioned him not to expect too much, as air tornado's range was lower compared to cyclone. As Jink decided to continue their journey, they suddenly spotted something approaching. It was a weary adventurer carrying their unconscious partner. Jink inquired about their condition, and the man urged them to retreat as well. Wondering what was happening, Jink asked for an explanation. The adventurer revealed that they had stumbled upon an ant nest nearby and were unfortunate enough to encounter a swarm of ants. When questioned about their other companions, the adventurer feared they might have already become ant food. Jink admitted to never having fought ants before and offered to help heal them in exchange for more details. While Jink and Ian tended to the injured pair, one of them described the difficulty of battling a swarm of ants, who attacked with their front claws and sprayed acidic substances. Despite their sturdy shells, the ants were vulnerable to fire. Jink realized they were ill-equipped for such a fight, as they were still new to fire magic and primarily relied on water and wind magic, respectively. The adventurer elaborated that the ants fiercely protected their queen, requiring a significant number of sorcerers to overcome them. Only certain clans possessed the necessary magic, as the other adventurer regained consciousness and expressed gratitude for their help. They cautioned Jink and Ian against confronting the ants before departing from the area. Ian noticed Jink's worried expression and asked what was wrong. Jink told them to rush to the 24th floor while being careful. The whole group went around and suddenly found themselves in the middle of the area. Just as they tried checking their map, nearby cows suddenly sensed something and started running away, passing by Jink and the others. Jink heard some rumbling and wondered if there would be an earthquake. Nina, looking anxious, told Jink to look over the distance. 3 adventurers were being chased by a swarm of huge ants. The female mage tried to fend off the ants using fire magic. She managed to eliminate some ants, but some of them started attacking with acid by spewing it out. The acid hit the mage's arm, and her arm started melting. Watching them struggle despite using fire magic, Jink wondered if his group could do something against thousands of ants. Esther and Nina then asked what their action should be. Ian said that they could save themselves by leaving the others to their death. Esther and Nina were shocked by Ian's proposition. Jink agreed that running away was the best option. However, he knew the kids would feel guilty soon after. He instructed the others to scatter the ants using their spells and keep their mana going by drinking a lot of potions. Jink then led the others, fully responsible for his party members' safety as the leader. Just then, the 3 adventurers noticed them and suggested running away. Jink told them to run as they bought some time for them. The adventurers called him crazy, but soon recognized Jink as the famous enchanter. Jink exclaimed they would also run away if they found the right timing. The other adventurers then ran away as they thanked Jink for the support. Jink then used Water Cyclone to break the swarm's formation. Esther then followed up with his Air Tornado and Spear attacks. Ian also used his wind magic to scatter the ants, and Nina did the same using Water Ball. However, the ants kept swarming in, and Jink chugged down more potions down his throat. He realized they were not efficient since they couldn't use fire magic. Both he and Ian had huge mana pools, but the kids didn't have much. Jink then instructed Esther and Nina to go near him, and he used Water Wall to protect the two. He told them to drink some potions and heal up. Jink then looked around as he tried thinking what to do next.